We've got a great show to wrap up the week for you. All the way from London at 12 o'clock at night, we've got Calvin Innes, the general manager and executive creative director at JvM NERD. Calvin is a creative who's worked across brands like Mercedes-Benz, Mini, Riot Games, to name a few. He's been a jurist for the Cannes Lions, and he's also an accomplished speaker and contributor to organizations like TED and the COP conference. Calvin, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So I've had a lot of fun doing the research on you today. Looking forward to diving into this idea of fandom and nerd culture and gaming and all these things that are near and dear to my heart as a older millennial. But why don't you take us back to the beginning? Where'd you grow up? What was life like? Where'd you go to school? Like, what got you into the industry?
Cool. Yeah. It's been a while since I thought about it, to be honest. Yeah, so I'm originally from Scotland, very, very young. And obviously moved to England like super young. I kind of grew up in Yorkshire. Still, I've moved back to Yorkshire now. I work in London, but I kind of like my family's in Yorkshire. Bring my kids up there. I kind of fell into. I didn't fall into it. I started drawing super young. I've always drawn, always kind of created stuff. Some of my earliest memories are drawing, and that kind of got me. I had a weird path into marketing, realistically. It started as an illustrator, started as a designer. When I was super young, going to school in Yorkshire, I would draw all the time. I was kind of, everybody in the class knew I could draw. Everybody I met knew I could draw. I could just do it naturally. Something I always really enjoyed. Massive comic geek as a kid. Still am, huge comic collector. But I remember reading my first kind of comic book, first copy of Beano, when I was maybe like 4 years old, and just completely fell in love with it. Just the art style, just the idea of drawing cartoons. Started drawing from there. Eventually kind of got into Marvel and DC and got really into that stuff. But it started with the Beano, the Dandy, Whizzer and Chips, Topper, all the old kind of like classic British DC Thompson kind of comics. And I'd draw them for kids at school. I'd draw my own comics. I'd draw my own cartoon strips. It was a really good way of impressing people.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can draw a little funny cartoon strip, make someone laugh. It's a nice way to break the ice.
Very cool.
And yeah, it kind of went. It was all I ever kind of really wanted to do, to be honest. It was creative stuff. I mean, as soon as when I kind of graduated from illustration and drawing stuff, I was kind of like, first time I picked up a camera, kind of short films and learning to do stop motion. Taught myself to do stop motion super young. And then it was always just something I enjoyed doing. I never actually realized I could do it as a career. I think when I got a little bit older and realized that you could draw pictures to impress girls, that was always useful. You can impress your friends. You can kind of like, you can draw cartoons and you can trade them for a bag of sweets. I'm like, this is kind of cool. You could do something with this. And yeah, it kind of went from there. I just, my drawing kind of led me onto the creative industries. So I was into illustration and publishing long before I was into anything else. Like super young, I think I got my first book published when I was about 14.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was just it was a random short story writing competition, and did some illustrations with it as well. It's kind of like, okay, this is cool. I could probably do something with this. And then I just kind of, any opportunity that ever came up to do something creative, whether it was filmmaking, whether it was animation, whether it was drawing, whatever it was, I'd just do it. And that's led to me having a really interesting career, really sort of like non-traditional career. I've been in marketing for over 20 years now. Been doing illustrations for probably 25 years. And I mean, it's been everything from painting 80-foot high murals to designing toy packaging to working on TV commercials, for short films, for doing, then obviously into advertising in a big way. And yeah, it's been an interesting trip, but definitely not traditional.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, did you go to art school or did you go right out of kind of primary grade school into working in the creative industry?
Yeah, so I had an opportunity really young. I didn't go to art school. I never
Okay.
studied. I never studied as an artist. I never studied illustration. I've self-taught in absolutely everything.
Hmm.
If it was a blank canvas, I would draw on it. Eventually led to me to doing tattooing and all sorts of stuff, just as a way of kind of just drawing stuff. Yeah, doing graffiti art, murals, that kind of stuff. But no, I had an opportunity when I was really young, or relatively young, sort of 16, 17, to get into marketing, to do an apprenticeship, and start learning the ropes. And I was really lucky, sort of really young, kind of working down in London. I spent a year working in London, essentially sleeping on friends' sofas, kind of bumming around, doing as much work as I possibly could without actually getting paid for it. And then came back up to Yorkshire to study at university here. But my route for university is I essentially chose to do a TV and film design course,
Mm.
because it had nothing to do with the course. I mean, the course was fine. I'm sure it was perfect for a lot of people. It gave me the access to all of their equipment. So
I see. So just a hack to get into the rooms where back in the day, things weren't so accessible, right?
exactly. It was editing suites. It was cameras. It was all the good stuff. And that's when I first started working freelance. So I managed to get a bunch of freelance gigs as a designer using the university's equipment, and that I got very. I do believe you make your own luck. I feel like I got lucky, but I forced my way into a lot of places. And super early on, working with Sony, with Cadbury's, with Nestle, with some really big brands when I was really young. When I realistically had no real right to work for those kind of brands. But I learned really early on to just graft. I think it's partly being part Scottish. It's a trait, you know. I had to work 20-hour days. I would work 20-hour days, and that led to me doing a lot of quite cool projects quite early on, and then it just kind of built from there.
So the discipline is part of the lesson too. Putting in the time, putting in the reps.
Absolutely. I still think it's the best way. Any sort of young creatives coming through is just to graft, just to push for absolutely everything, do everything you can, you know.
I love it. So those early opportunities to work with like Nestle and Cadbury, did that come as a freelancer with like bigger agencies, or what was kind of your more formal transition, I suppose, into like the agency or the marketing world, or were you always kind of freelance?
Yeah, well, early on, I spent a long time as a freelance designer. So my route into marketing was through pure design, and it was design, or it was branding, it was logos, it was kind of like it was print design, it was some digital design. But obviously, this is going a long way back, so a lot of it was actually print, and it was essentially just freelance stuff for different agencies. But again, I was kind of like I managed to force my way in. I mean, I assume there's some talent there as well, but I managed to force my way into most of the big agencies at some point. So most of the big agencies across the UK and several of the ones across Europe, I did freelance work for. Built up a really strong portfolio kind of early on, and it kind of probably took me a good maybe 7 or 8 years to realize that I wanted to do more than design.
Mhm.
Design's part of it, but the strategy and the kind of creative thinking around why you should come up with an idea, why you should develop a project a certain way, why you approach a project in a way that is going to speak to a certain audience of fans of kind of whatever the community is around that brand. That was super interesting to me. So alongside the design, I started pouring myself into that, learning, picking up as much strategy as possible, working with people who I could just be like a sponge effectively and just kind of learn how they were developing things. And that led me on to kind of realizing that I wanted to go the creative direction route, a little bit more on the strategic side, a little bit more on the kind of nurturing a team to come up with creative ideas and develop them rather than just purely just designing my own stuff, you know.
I love that. And then, were you always kind of doing these types of design and creative works like in and around this area that you've really built an expertise around, which is, fandom, what you've coined nerd culture, kind of gaming spaces. Has that always been a through line in the work that you've done, or have you kind of did more traditional things and moved into those areas because it was what you were passionate about? Like how did kind of deep diving into the fandom side of things progress throughout your career?
Yeah, so early on, it was traditional marketing.
Yeah.
So 100% traditional marketing. It was print, digital. It was learning how to do out of home. It was learning how to do magazine spreads. It was brand development, logo development, that kind of stuff. It was completely traditional, which is great, and I enjoyed it for a while. I enjoyed it to a certain level. It began to feel a little bit like a job. Kind of, it was just sort of rinse and repeat, where I would go do this work and work that I was proud of. We did some really cool work. We won plenty of awards. We did some nice stuff, but it was just kind of, there's something not quite there. I would kind of like go home and still collect comics and collect toys and be into retro films and TV series and gaming and all this kind of stuff. And the two very rarely crossed over. So it was probably 10 years into my career where I started leaning more into that space. I'm a huge sneakerhead, always have been.
I saw your if those of you who aren't looking in the background, if we went full screen, you would see a huge sneaker collection over on the right when we did the pre-interview. I mean, he's basically sitting in a collector's heaven right there.
Yeah, this is my background is basically 20 years worth of either stuff that I've worked on or stuff that's been close to the stuff that I've worked on. And it's just my random collection. On the other side of the camera, it's a wall of comics and film memorabilia and that kind of stuff. So I'm literally surrounded by the stuff.
So good.
It's cool. It's kind of it's nice looking back on it now. It's nice looking at some of the inspiration, some of the stuff that I've kind of worked on, sort of seeing where it led to. The nice thing now is the work that I do. It's kind of skipped a little bit in the middle, but essentially it's kind of all the work I do now is around the stuff that I love, which is
that's great.
An amazing thing to be able to say. It really is. It's kind of heavily in gaming, heavily in sneaker culture, heavily in anime, manga, everything around fandom. But yeah, it took me probably 10 years to actually begin to lean into that space. And it's a space I've been working in almost primarily for the last 7 or 8 years now. Obviously, I set up my own agency. I ran my own agency for, again, skipping a little bit of the story.
That's all good.
So I kind of got bored of the whole freelance thing because it was, like I say, it was rinse and repeat. It was the same kind of work. It was high profile clients. It was well paid. It was all the good stuff that I should have been perfectly happy with, and I kind of wasn't. I wanted to do things my own way, so I set up my own agency that I ended up running for almost 10 years before we got rid of that. We sort of closed that down a few years ago, and it started off being exactly how I wanted an agency to be, which was very much kind of leaning into just the cool stuff, just massive out of home installations, just fun projects, just super creative. And then we grew kind of quite a lot. We had a fairly big team. We had a couple of offices, and it became really corporate. Business point of view was great, absolutely fine. But it was exactly what I didn't want because I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. So I think for the last 3 or 4 years of the business, I was picking up freelance work again because that allowed me to lean into this fandom space. And then eventually made the decision to close it down and just focus 100% on this, which is where we are now.
I love it. Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. I've talked to, other creative leaders like Jason Sperling at Notion, and he wrote a whole book about creative management and the idea that, creatives are essentially rewarded for winning awards and the work that they do by getting more and more management roles, more and more, managerial responsibilities to manage a team and grow a business and run a P&L and, kind of do the business side of an agency versus the thing that they were rewarded for was actually the work. And it's kind of a little bit of a strange dichotomy that the more successful you become as a creative within an agency or running your own agency, the less you get to spend time on the things that actually got you the awards and allowed you to create the great work that you're able to bring to bear for clients. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, isn't it?
It is. It's exactly that, and it's kind of it is. The more successful you become, the less creative you become, which is is insane. Trying to look at it now, and it's sort of this is where it was a tough decision, because obviously it was. I mean, when you build a business, it was something I'd done for like a decade. We kind of put a lot of work into it. It becomes your baby when you build a business. The decision to close it down and to move on was tough at the time, but I knew it was right. I knew it was the right thing to do, because it was just I wasn't getting what I needed from the work we were doing anymore. Once you get so far into a business, it's very difficult to restructure that business to do something completely different. So making the decision to lean just purely into the stuff that I love, and it was a discussion with my wife. My wife is ridiculously supportive, which is kind of really lucky. It allows me to do the stupid stuff that I do. And yeah, it was just kind of like, right, just go all in, see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? And that was 7 years ago. And it's all I do now is
I love it.
Fun stuff, which is quite nice to say.
Do you enjoy creative leadership, creative mentorship? Do you like to, run a team of creatives that are kind of being guided by, your philosophy? Is that something you enjoy?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love it, which is weird to me, to be honest, because when I was younger, it is not the kind of thing I would ever have wanted to do. When I was kind of younger, coming up in the industry, and when I was a kid as well, I was kind of terrified of speaking in front of people. I was terrified of kind of like trying to lead a room or any of that kind of stuff. I was pretty shy. I was pretty introverted when I was younger. I was a comic book geek, as I got older and got into sports and that kind of stuff, I got a little bit more confident. But as still, the idea of building this team would have terrified me. Now I really do, because it's obviously I've been in the industry a really long time now, and not having a traditional route into marketing, I think is in a lot of ways an advantage. It's allowed me to work on projects that most people in the marketing space will never have worked on, will never have been anywhere near. The idea of delivering a mural project where you're climbing up 70, 80-foot walls across 4 or 5 months across the whole of England installing murals, most marketers will never have done. That blend of the pure creative side and the marketing side is something that is nice, and it's nice to be able to kind of take some of that knowledge and kind of pass it on to a team, and also kind of nurture people in a way that's that I wish I'd had when I was younger. When I was coming up, there's certain people I learned off. Some people in the industry who are standout amazing, and there's other people I've worked with who were not so amazing. Kind of like be able to impart the things that I think work really well onto a team. That is really nice. There's also, as I've kind of got a little bit older, I'm 41 now, coming up to 42. I like sitting back a little bit more as well. I like the initial ideas, and I like the creative, and I like guidance, but then I also really like seeing how other creators then take the idea and add their own flavor in and develop it in their own way. That's actually really nice to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. On the mentorship side, anybody you want to shout out, and something that you learned from them that was really impactful?
I think it's really interesting at the moment, to be honest, is kind of the team I work with at the moment. I'm extremely lucky within Nerd, and it's the reason I joined, almost the entire reason I joined. There are, so Andre, who is one of the managing directors and creative director at Nerd over in Hamburg, and Towan. Towan is the founder of Nerd. Between them, Andre is probably the best creative I've worked with in my career. Towan is stand out the best strategist I've worked with in my whole career. So when I first went over to Hamburg, and it was supposed to be just going for a coffee, really, I happened to be over in Hamburg anyway, meeting a friend of mine. I got a message from Towan asking if I can kind of, fancy meeting up for a coffee. So yeah, fair enough. By the time we left, we were already planning on establishing NERD London, already talking about projects we worked on, because when you sat with people who are on the same wavelength as you and work at a certain level and just know exactly how they need to get there, and are almost kind of saying things before you've had a chance to say them, it's really nice. I think everybody in the creative industry has flaws. There's certain things that they can do. And it's really nice when you get a group of people who are fully aware of what they're capable of and what they can do, and they have full trust in the people they're working with to do what they do really well. And that's what kind of attracted me to Nerd, is the people behind the business were, like I say, the best I've ever worked with. And it's been a ride over the last year and a half. But yeah, I think, like I said, right the way through my career, very early on, worked with some amazing people. But more recently has been probably the biggest impact, because I've seen the biggest changes over the last sort of couple of years from working with these guys.
That's awesome. So yeah, let's talk about Nerd. You are the GM and executive creative director. For those who might not be familiar with the agency, who are you guys? What's your superpower? What's your positioning in the marketplace right now? And why do you think brands choose to work with you guys?
So Nerd is exactly what it says on the tin. We are a bunch of nerds who work in marketing. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's essentially it. We're kind of
a good way to boil it down.
Yeah, it is. We are genuine nerds. The people who've worked in marketing for a long time, the majority of the team, or the more senior team. But at our core, we're all gamers. We're all sneakerheads. We're all into anime. We're all into manga. We read comic books. We're into sci-fi. And not just a little bit into it. I mean, we're heavy into it. We also kind of, as part of the team, we bring in real super nerds. I mean, genuine super nerds who have less experience in marketing, but they are hardcore nerds. And these are people who could like literally tell you the shoe size of every one of the Ninja Turtles. It's just nerddom. And that's kind of what's needed for what we do. Because the thing that makes us kind of stand out against other agencies who have pop culture divisions and kind of like say that they are on the, I mean, phrase is kind of thrown around all the time, on the cutting edge of pop culture. I mean, every agency says it. Realistically, unless you really live it, unless you're really deep in it, and it is like a real passion for you, and you're actually part of these fandoms, you're never going to understand the fandoms. So what we do is we allow brands to lean into these fandoms authentically, and speak in a way that actually speaks to the fandoms instead of encroaching on their space. Allows them to connect with fandoms in a way that they would never normally be able to do. A lot of brands do logo slapping. They think like, oh, Roblox is the coolest place to be right now. Let's get into Roblox. They develop a Roblox game and it falls flat on its face.
Yeah, because nobody goes there because it's not cool.
Exactly. They've not considered the fans. They've not considered how to talk to people, what the language should be. And that's where we come in. We allow brands to speak authentically to fandoms and do things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I love that. You talked about hiring people that aren't just stooped in advertising and marketing, but really are, the quintessential super fan in the areas of fandom that you guys operate in. Sounds a lot kind of like your background, somebody from a non-traditional background. Do you think that's one of the reasons why you felt so at home and part of the team and really felt so like you've really, you're being challenged at the highest levels over the last year and a half?
Yeah, 100%. It's a really interesting dynamic within Nerd, and this is why it kind of works so well, is that you have especially amongst the senior team, you've got people who've been working in marketing for 20 years, who have done major kind of global campaigns. But when they go home to relax, they game, or they skate at the weekend, or they collect comics, or they have the sneaker collection, or they are genuine fans. But they also have this understanding, and this is like I said, my first half of my career was traditional marketing. There's an understanding of how this then translates into marketing, into social media content, into creating TVCs, into whatever it might be, and this allows you to kind of do genuinely authentic work. Work that doesn't feel forced and work that doesn't feel fake. So when you're brainstorming with guys who are genuinely super nerds, half of the time you're spitballing ideas that sound super nerdy to everybody outside, but you're spotting the nuggets where this would apply to a real marketing situation, or this is how you can make a brand connect with this fandom, or this is how you can lean into a space or a brand partnership that was completely unexpected, but it makes perfect sense. So when you've got things like Nerd did a partnership with Pokemon and Mini at Gamescom, which had global reach, a huge amount of people saw it, massive fan engagement, and on the face of it doesn't make a lot of sense. But by understanding how the fans engage, the value of the IP, the tone of voice of the car brand, we're able to strike this perfect balance. And we do this regularly. It's kind of like the Pringles Mario collaboration. This is kind of like, it's literally launched globally fairly recently. It's these kind of collaborations that just work, that just hit the spot. So we spend a lot of time kind of understanding the fandoms and helping the brands to understand the fandoms as well, so they can actually lean into those spaces, like I say, authentically, and that's kind of the key.
Yeah, authenticity is one of those buzzwords that we really can't get away from, because it really is just so important, and it speaks, I think, so highly to like what makes successful partnerships inside of any affinity, whether it's in fandom or action sports or mainstream sports. Authenticity is really the secret unlock. So tell me a little bit more about something like a partnership with Mini and Pokemon. Is Pokemon the client? Is Mini the client? Are they both the clients? Which side of that relationship did you guys start with, or do you guys broker both sides? Tell me a little bit about the starting point.
So it's kind of different with every project, realistically. We kind of work with a whole range of different brands, and we have endemic brands, which obviously in the gaming space or in the nerd space, and non-endemic brands, which are the brands that might be a fashion brand or a music brand or an automotive brand that want to lean into this nerd space. And initially, it's a case of whoever's approached us is then identifying the best way to do this. So what will happen a lot of the time with kind of brand collaborations is people will just think, okay, cool. So Bluey or Barbie or another Mattel IP. This is a hot IP. Cool. I want to go buy some IP rights. I want to stick their logo on my brand, and there you go. And that happens, and that happens a lot. And that's fine. It's why you get Barbie lunchboxes and Barbie joggers and hats and everything else you can imagine. And it's fine, but it's kind of it's also kind of hollow, realistically. There's nothing long term there. There's nothing fans are really going to lead into. So our first job is always to understand who the brand is. So in this case, for example, Mini, understand who they are, what their brand position is, what their tone of voice is, and what audience they want to lean into. And normally that audience is because they have a pain point, because they're either not connecting with that audience at the moment, they see an opportunity to expand their audience, or they want to do something that is going to get them social media or PR traction, again, to kind of expand the audience. So it's not a case of us just saying like, okay, this is a super hot IP, let's partner you with them. It's finding the right mix, and the right tone, and the thing that's gonna resonate for that brand, but also feel authentic to the fandom. And that's the key, because the thing is about fandoms over audiences, and I do see them as two completely different things, is fandoms are fiercely passionate and massively engaged, and for them, the thing that they're into, So Pokemon, for an example, is they live it. They love it. It's part of their life. It's part of their identity. It's who they are. It's not just something that they like. So for me, an audience is you have a passive group of people that you're telling stuff to. You're either selling them things or you're informing them of what to do next. And that's the traditional way of marketing. You build an audience, you have a bunch of people you can then sell something to. It's fine. A fandom is different. It's organic. There's an opportunity for fandoms to grow in ways that you could never expect, for them to expand the lore of your story, for them to take their characters to heart and do fan art or fan stories, or kind of like to shape your world in a way that you would never ever imagine as a brand. A fandom is a very, very different thing. So once you've identified who that fandom is, it's then working out how to take that brand, so a car brand, and work in that space in a way that feels like you're adding to their world rather than just encroaching on it. So we work a really simple kind of ethos, I suppose, is that you have to give love to receive love. So the fandom space, you have to show that you genuinely love that space, that you value the fandom's time. And people spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of their life in these fandoms. So if you're going to lean into that space, you have to genuinely show that you respect that and you love that, if you expect any of that back.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what was the insight with Mini that kind of led you to Pokemon being the right partner for their entree into fandom?
So Pokemon, so short, obviously there's much more to it than this, but essentially Pokemon boils down as being one of the most recognizable, one of the most loved, one of the highest engagement IPs in the world. Is literally global. It's globally recognized across multiple age groups. The fans are fans. I mean, they are fans. They live Pokemon. You obviously have your casual fans, but kind of real Pokemon fans, they live it. They know it inside out. They spend a lot of their time investing in the cards, playing the game, trading, playing things like Pokemon Go, getting the merchandise. They're all in. So for a brand like Mini wanting to lean into a space where they know they need to connect with a younger audience, but not just a younger audience, they also need to position themselves as a brand that is cool and relevant, and different. Mini's got kind of an edge to it as a car brand. It's not like a very traditional, boring car brand. It is.
Yeah, I remember they were partnered with, I think, Tony Hawk at one time. You know, like that's a great example of a non-traditional spokesperson, right?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So it's kind of like having that kind of brand opens up possibilities. But saying that, to be honest, it's kind of some of the work that we've done is super interesting when it's not a cool brand. So Mini is a fantastically cool brand. I absolutely love them. We still work with them to this day. Pokemon is a super cool brand. Some of the most interesting stuff that we do is taking brands that are on the face of it kind of quite boring. You know, there's nothing kind of like going to wow you about them. It's insurance companies, it's banking, it's that kind of stuff. But one of the really nice things you're then able to do is look at gamification. So as part of the work that we do, it's not necessarily just developing brand partnerships and gaming IPs and that kind of stuff, although we do all of that. It's looking at how we can inject elements of gamification and kidult culture into these brands. So if you imagine with any business, you obviously have kind of HR processes, you have kind of like these boring health and safety things that everybody has to do. Nobody enjoys it, but legally you have to do it. But if you imagine having to go through this HR process and you create gamification around it. So by completing a form, you earn a certain amount of points and you level up, and then you can progress to the next level where you win bonuses or an extra day off or kind of like lunch vouchers or that kind of stuff. And you create a game around completing these very boring, mundane tasks. Then all of a sudden you get higher engagement, you get people more interested, you get people wanting to complete them because you've gamified them. Because there's a it's just basic psychology, is human nature, is people want to compete and people want to play games, and people want to do these kind of mechanics, and it just makes really mundane tasks more interesting. And it's a really nice shift that we're kind of seeing in the space across all brands, really, especially non-endemic brands who kind of like want to enter this space, is looking at how they can gamify these quite mundane things to make them a little bit more interesting. And you see it across shopping, you see it on Temu, you see it on Duolingo, learning languages, where everything is playing games, and it just makes the whole process more interesting. It makes people like kind of far more engaged.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're actually injecting game mechanics into not just the marketing, but almost into the customer experience or even the employee experience inside of large organizations to just make things more fun.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Because I mean, I think at heart, I think most grown-ups, there's still a little bit of kid there somewhere, with varying degrees. Obviously, people like me, I'm basically a giant 10-year-old. I think everybody's kind of got that in them. There's something in them where they crave a little bit of competition. They crave a little bit of play, even if they don't consider themselves gamers. The idea of having a gamified element or something that is a little bit of competition against their colleagues or their family, or it's appealing, and it just works at a really base level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think about most of my career on the agency side has been in business development. And I oftentimes think about business development as a game. It's like, how many people can I talk to? How many proposals can I get? How many of those turn into, opportunities? And it's kind of like a quest when you're at a conference. You've got these like lists of characters that you need to like go and find and, have a conversation with. And I think also, like, if I think about my behavior as a gamer, I think I have a little bit of OCD, and I've always been like a gamer who, like, if I know I need to get to a certain level or get like a certain amount of gold, I will like do the most boring thing for like 3 or 4 hours that feels like it's work almost, to get to like the level that I think I need to be at, or to get enough gold to go buy the item that I need to like then go in and like re-engage like whatever spot I went into and like lost. So I think there's a little bit of that psychology, I think, at play with people on my side of the the ecosystem.
This is a really beautiful thing about gaming.
Uh-huh.
For a start, gaming as an industry is just mind blowing how big it is. If you look at soccer, it's obviously football in the UK, is worth 250 billion a year. Gaming is worth upwards of 300 billion a year.
Wow.
It dwarfs it. And it's kind of like, then you add on the other nerd things as well. You add on anime, manga, sci-fi, that kind of stuff. It gets up towards 400 billion a year. And all of a sudden, it's this colossal thing. And if you look at kind of like nerd IPs, I mean, the top 16 or 16 of the top 20 film franchises of the last decade have been nerd IPs. There've been superhero films, there've been sci-fi films, there've been Harry Potter, there've been that kind of stuff. It's the entire space isn't nerd culture realistically. It is culture.
It's mass culture.
Yeah, completely. And the thing is with gaming, it allows it. So, like I said, the way you game is different to the way some other people game. So it's very similar to the way I game. To be honest, I would do exactly the same. There are some people who are more into cozy gaming. So cozy gaming like Candy Crush, that kind of stuff, is just a quick little thing on their mobile phone. There are some people that are into pure, out and out competitive action, kind of fighting, whatever it might be. And if you're leaning into this space as a brand, it's about identifying how people engage and how people work, and then making sure that the way you connect with them, again, it's that word again, it feels authentic to them, and you're speaking to them. There is always a way, because realistically, even if you don't game, if you've never picked up a game in your life, you've probably played cards or played chess or done stupid little things where you're driving in traffic and you're waiting for the traffic light to change, and you're doing little countdowns in your head, and you're playing these little games in your head about when the lights are going to change or when dogs are going to cross the road, or it's silly little things that when you look at it a little bit deeper, there's gaming mechanics within there, and it's identifying those little things and seeing where you can kind of make the most of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. What are you guys thinking about kind of cross-generational households? Like, one of the things that was interesting for me, I pretty much put games down in college. You know, I was more interested in, you know, beer and frat parties and stuff like that in college, but I was super into it as a kid. And then all the way up to COVID, I had pretty much not picked up a gaming system, didn't have one in the house. And then during COVID, I actually bought a Xbox because I was trying to organize these interagency NBA 2K tournaments to, like, you know,
Nice.
like basically like do something to engage with people that were like stuck at home, like during like early COVID. So I got one, and but then I started playing Fortnite with my kids, and you know, my daughters both like to play it. They're 11 and 9, and I like to play it. It's something we can actually do together. It's like a way for us to sit in front of the TV to agree on what we're going to do. Like, usually it's like, oh, I want to watch this show, so I'm going to go to my room or take my device over to this corner. Or my wife doesn't want to, you know, watch. Like, we all have different tastes and different things we want to do, so it's hard for us to sit at the living room and agree on something. But one thing I can at least agree on with my kids is we can play Fortnite. How much are you guys thinking about kind of intergenerational households and how, like, you know, multi-generational dads are basically kids and their parents are gaming together now? How much is that an insight that you guys think about or try and leverage?
Yeah, it isn't a huge one. I have 3 kids, from like 7 to almost 13 now. And I play with them sort of regularly, and we're a very standard family in that way. It kind of happens. So it's also the idea that gaming is for kids is completely outdated. It really is. I mean, like I say, most of the people within nerd game, even those of us who are a little bit older, like myself, still game. Grandparents are gaming. It's actually, and there's gaming in different ways as well. So obviously there's gaming on the traditional route that you've kind of, obviously Fortnite's kind of a big one. I play with my boys Fortnite all the time. There's also gamified elements that are being injected into things for the elderly, to increase cognitive function, to dexterity of the fingers, and this kind of stuff is being used in therapy. After injuries, after brain injuries, after spinal injuries, that kind of stuff is therapy to kind of get people moving again. It's been moved across. It's the cozy gaming, as I sort of mentioned before, like kind of playing on mobile phones. Cozy gaming is predominantly a female audience, but not massively. Also, if you look at the UK, I mean, there's an assumption that gaming is, or there has been an assumption in the past that gaming is for boys. It's completely false. Completely false now. Kind of, there's different types of games, but the split in the UK is pretty much even. It's maybe 1 or 2% more male swayed, but that's all. It's almost,
yeah, especially in the games that have scale, right? Like, I think Roblox is 90 million active users per month, even almost evenly split male and female.
Yeah, and it's kind of, and it's a massive shift, but partly because people have been addressing more how different people play games, and not just male and female. It's just different people generally. Then all of a sudden you open up to a wider audience, so you're going to get more of a split. But it's kind of like you have gamers right the way from 3-4 years old up to 90 years old. And families are playing together. They're playing different types of games together. We regularly do as a family. Once a week, Friday nights, we have pizza and we all game together. And it's cool. It's a shared experience, and that's kind of, it's a big shift away from years ago, because I think the whole shift of the landscape for gaming has changed, and the view of what gaming is and what gaming should be. This assumption that if people play Call of Duty, that they're going to become violent. It is ridiculous, is insane. It's been proven wrong by countless studies. Now and again, the media twists stuff, but that's what the media does. The reality is, gaming is normally a way of people coming together. I mean, even when you go back to kind of prior to how easy gaming is to kind of do as a community project now, community activity now, where you had LAN parties, and you just hundreds of people sat in a room together,
or e-cafes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's friendly. It's always friendly and welcoming. And there's the traditional stuff that you get, the same as you get in sports teams or that kind of stuff, where there's a little bit of kind of like, a little bit of banter, a little bit of kind of jibing each other, but there's kind of like, there's no animosity. It's generally a really welcoming space, which is why it's kind of, it's part of the reason it's grown in the way that it has, is that it's such a welcoming space for kind of all ages, all sexes, all backgrounds, all religious views, whatever it might be. There's not really anything to stop anybody getting into gaming, and it's also massively accessible. It's so accessible now. You can play games on your mobile phone that are far better than most console systems were sort of like 6 or 7 years ago. So there's not really an opportunity, there's not really a space or a place that you can be in where you can't game if you want to, which is part of the reason it's kind of grown to the level it has so far and continues to grow year on year. It just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah. I feel like metaverse and web, like kind of this metaverse was a hype cycle a while back, a lot of investment, a lot of brands, really betting the farm. If you think about like companies like Facebook and Meta, and then it kind of became a little bit more subdued and quiet, mainly because of scalability. And now if you think of like what's left of metaverse, it's really online gaming communities are where you have the scale, like Roblox, Fortnite. It's these multi-player online worlds that people can come in and experience all at the same time in a community and a map that are really, whether it's like creation or like just experiencing them. I read this article about like, kids under 18 who are becoming millionaires on Roblox by designing games and things like that. What's your kind of point of view on the idea of the metaverse and VR? And will that ever, do you think, come to the mainstream? Did we just go kind of too fast, too quick, or what's your current state of the metaverse, I suppose?
Yeah, it's super interesting. In that, I mean, as a company, we were one of the first to market in Europe with an Apple Vision Pro product, where we had an interactive map where you could kind of move people around and experiment. And Apple Vision Pro, and this is partly to do with how the media covers certain things. And how brands push things themselves, actually. So the Apple Vision Pro, when it came out, was obviously hugely expensive, very experimental, but it was a proof of concept. It was always meant to be a proof of concept. So the fact that it was then pulled was always the plan. See if people would adopt it, see what the possibilities were, and to kind of like say, look, this is what we're doing. It was a very Apple thing to do, realistically. The Meta the Meta Quest and
the Quest.
New headsets that are coming out, the glasses as well.
Yeah, the Ray-Bans seem to actually be like their fastest growing way to kind of propagate the metaverse is the Ray-Ban partnership.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's going to continue to grow as the technology gets smaller, basically, and faster. VR gaming, when it's done right, is insanely good. Is separate thing, and the biggest problems in the past, so obviously when PlayStation came out with their VR, there were some really cool games, really nice, but you had to be wired in. It was a very bulky headset. It was kind of like you had to stand in front of a camera in the right way, the right, it glitched all over the place. Within a few years, we've kind of got to these completely remote headsets that are getting much smaller and much lighter. They're continuing to do so. I think at one point, and we're only a couple of years away from this, when it gets to the point where it feels like you're wearing pair of headphones like you're wearing now, or a pair of sunglasses, or something that isn't intrusive too much, it will change things massively. And we're not too far away from that. And this is kind of where we're seeing we're seeing the worlds start to collide at the moment. You've got kind of VR headsets, you've got the glasses, you've got smart glasses. They will become one and merge together and become much smaller and much more manageable, much more affordable as well. And I think mixed reality is realistically where some of the most interesting stuff is happening. The idea that you can kind of walk around and not realize you're wearing anything, but interact with Google and get live translations and talk to somebody from another country and actually have them live translated and get your train timetables popping up and all this kind of stuff, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's intrusive. We're not very far away from that. And that, I think, is a complete game changer for everything. It's going to change how brands are working. It's going to change how gaming works. It's going to change how people just do day-to-day things, very, very simple things. And that's a really interesting space that we're doing kind of quite a lot of work in, quite a lot of research in to kind of understand exactly when things are going to happen, how brands are going to react to this. The whole thing with kind of the sort of say NFTs and kind of like the launch of all this kind of like the whole metaverse, when there was a big hoo-ha about it and everybody got really into it, and it was kind of like, oh, look, it's all collapsed. That happens with everything. It happens with every new technology. There's always a huge kind of rush where people go a little bit crazy. It's .com boom again. It's the same thing again. People go mad for a little while. Huge amount of money being thrown around. Stuff collapses. Everyone's like, oh, it's not going to exist anymore. Of course it is. It's just going to exist in a slightly different way. Like the idea of the blockchain. The blockchain is not going anywhere. The blockchain is an extremely clever, secure way of storing data. And if you look at tickets to gigs, that kind of stuff, it already works. You're already buying digital tickets. So the idea that you buy a digital ticket and then that then becomes an asset that is collectible makes a hell of a lot of sense. And it's already sort of there. And it's not the idea of doing things like Bored Ape, where you're doing 300 grand for a picture of an ape. That's not where it is. It's that was the thing that got people looking at it, and it also gets people pushing back and thinking that was crazy because they've crashed in prices. But the technology behind it isn't going anywhere, and it's just a case of seeing how that's going to be integrated over the next few years. And for me, it's not just an exciting space. It is the space where everything is going to move into. It just there's no doubt. It is. It's already happening.
And do you think the simultaneous kind of forefront of AI having its moment in the sun, I suppose, or just so much attention on AI, I imagine that will probably feed into this idea of mixed reality, where if you have like the whole canon of human knowledge built into and or feeding into these mixed reality devices, it will make the user experience, I mean, it's, we have the canon of information on our phones, and that was such a transformation. I imagine when it's being pumped into something that's, back and forth with your vision and your hearing. Like that's one of the things that I found. One of the coolest user experiences of the Ray-Bans isn't what you see; it's actually what you hear. Like the fact that you can play music and no one else can hear it. Like that's, or you can have a conversation, or somebody can be piping into your ear. Like you can be hearing things, but no one else hears it. That I thought was as interesting as what you were seeing in the visuals.
Yeah, absolutely, because it feels completely unintrusive. You're not having to wear big earphones. You're not having to wear a big headset or anything. It's just sort of there. And that's kind of the key for anything being successful. Any sort of new technology, as soon as it becomes like easily accessible and doesn't disrupt the rest of your life in some kind of crazy way, then it's going to be adopted much more quickly. Then obviously the more it's adopted, the more people are going to invest in it and the more developments you're going to get around it. And it's just makes sense. So that's kind of happening really quickly now. I think we're only, based on some of the stuff that's kind of coming out at the moment, some of the stuff that's predicted over the next couple of years, is the wearables that are going to make it so you can hear things completely unintrusive, so you can see things in perfect mixed realities where you don't get motion sickness, where you don't get these kind of like problems that you got with some of the early glasses, and you have it in a way that feels completely unintrusive. is super nice. And obviously Apple kind of has done the first step towards getting people used to this with the introduction of their Liquid UI sort of a few weeks ago. So obviously they updated the whole operating system, and it's this kind of like really sort of shiny, half translucent user interface that everyone's just kind of like, you can't quite see that quite right. It's like, but if you imagine it in a world where it's mixed reality, it makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of the first steps to that. And Apple has a history of doing this in the past anyway, where they're introducing something that is obviously going to lead on to the next stage. And this, almost every one of the technology companies is looking at mixed reality, because the technology is there. It's still slightly too high of a price point, but the technology is already there to have these completely unintrusive wearables. So we're only 2-3 years away from this becoming kind of the norm. And that's super exciting for gaming, for advertising, for everything. The idea that, and I think it was Google that patented this. No, sorry, Netflix was doing something with this. There's so obviously every year the brands kind of protect certain things. They launch certain, they get certain copyrights over things. There's the idea that you can use mixed reality to feed people adverts that are specific to them. So as you're walking down the street and you look at a billboard, and that billboard is owned by Netflix, but every single wearer of those glasses would see a completely different billboard, but it would fit the real world. That sort of technology makes marketing a completely different field, like super interesting. So I'm kind of excited to see where that goes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, totally. It's like in-game advertising in the real world. Couldn't they just drop a virtual billboard, or does there need to be a billboard for you to look at, and then everybody sees the same experience?
Yeah, it's exactly that as well. You can kind of like, I mean, at some point, I'm sure it's going to get to the point where you can sit on a bus, sit on a park bench, sit on a train or something, and somebody sat next to you, and you're going to have to question whether or not they're actually real or they're just being.
Oh man. Well, that'll be an interesting thing to see. All right, you've illustrated everything from children's books to adverts, toy packaging, games, even puzzles. Is there a type of project that energizes you the most, or a favorite way to express your skill as an illustrator?
As an illustrator, so I still regularly kind of lean into doing children's books. I have done for a really long time. It's kind of like, so my illustration career is kind of like, it's very separate to my marketing career, but there's a lot of crossover. My illustration career for me is kind of like it's like meditation. It's relaxing. It's kind of like it's just a really chilled thing to do. And I've been lucky enough to work on probably 30 plus children's books now. So I still really enjoy them because it's just again, it's kind of leaning into where I started as an illustrator. It's doing cartoons. It's just having fun. So I do really enjoy doing that, but at the same time, I still love doing the really big pieces. There's something about being stuck up a wall for a week, as weird as it sounds, and seeing at the end of it this huge mural. I do kind of really enjoy that side of things. I've not done one for a while, to be honest. Kind of the marketing side of stuff has taken over. I think the last mural I did was maybe like 4 years ago. But yeah, I do enjoy doing this.
I wish we could have got you out. We just did one with one of my clients in Brooklyn with Colossal Media, and one of my clients lost him. So maybe we'll have to look you up next time. We have something like that in the hopper. Yeah. So, London's kind of a global culture. It's a very international city. How do you think about London as this metropolitan city? Does it give you a lot of inspiration? Do you have a lot of attachment to London as like a cultural center that informs your philosophy and your work?
Yeah. I mean, I love London. It's where I cut my teeth. It's where I started in my marketing career, I suppose. I spend a lot of time in London now. So like I said, I actually live in Yorkshire. I moved up to Yorkshire sort of a few years ago, which is sort of 3.5 hours outside of London. But I spend least half of my time in London. And that's enough that I kind of work over in Hamburg and Berlin and kind of travel around quite a lot. London's, well, compared to any city I've been to, London is the most diverse, the most mixed, the most lively, the most active place. There's always something happening. There's always something interesting to look at. The music, the art, the food, everything. There's always something. And the nice thing about London, to be honest, and this is part of the reason we looked at opening the London office sort of almost a year ago now, is it's globally seen as a cultural hub, rightfully so. I think it generally is. There's something quite unique about London, but it's also recognized globally as well. So when it comes to having kind of conversations with US clients or with Saudi clients or with Asian clients, wherever they might be, being based in London is a nice starting point. It's a nice place to kind of to start the conversation from. We have offices kind of across the world. As JvM and as a nerd, we have several offices. Obviously, our big office is in Hamburg. But the conversations that we're able to have from London and from a UK point of view, and the UK is very, very unique in certain things that translate really well globally, but are owned by the UK, particularly the sense of humour is a big part of kind of what we do, and obviously lean into the spaces that we lean into when you're talking about fandoms and gaming and comics and all this kind of stuff. Having a sense of humor and an understanding of kind of dry wit and that natural sort of is super useful. It translates really, really well. Whereas the humor, I think, in other countries doesn't necessarily translate quite as well as it does from the UK.
Right. No, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, I know it's late on your side of the globe. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you staying up late and hanging out with us and the audience tonight. So if you could point the audience to learn more about the work at JvM NERD or to connect with you directly, anywhere you want to send people.
Yeah, man, sure. So I'm mega active on LinkedIn. So yeah, just Calvin Innes on LinkedIn. As far as I know, I'm the only one on there. Same on Instagram. Most of my Instagram stuff is toys and comics and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more sort of chilled than the LinkedIn business stuff. And literally just search JvM NERD. JvM NERD kind of shows up everywhere. We're the only ones who kind of really do what we do. So yeah, you can kind of check out the site. Obviously, JvM NERD London is what I head up. The work that we do is visible literally everywhere. Yeah, hit us up through LinkedIn. It's the best place. I try to kind of respond to everybody who messages through there as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Calvin, thanks for spending some time with us tonight. For everybody watching at home, if you're seeing the show or hearing us for the first time, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe if you want to hear from more creative leaders in the future. And if you give us an honest review, that's how the show finds a bigger audience organically on these podcast platforms. And most importantly, if there's a nerd out there somewhere in your life, a creative who you think would geek out on the conversation that I had with Calvin today, somebody from agency land, maybe you're a brand marketer and you are wanting to figure out an authentic way to enter some of these fandoms and some of these cultural moments, don't forget to share the show. And with that, we'll bid you a fair good night. Thanks so much, Calvin.